Well, many Zimbabweans are finding it increasingly difficult to live in a country where widespread cash shortages, high unemployment, and delays in public sector salaries continue. Zimbabwe's economy is also stagnating, while the budget deficit is ballooning. 4 out of 5 workers in Zimbabwe have no job. Musate Mapunguri is one of them. He used to be a civil servant.
You know, simple things as food on the table is just a mammoth task to have. I tell you, people are living on 1 meal. You know what I mean? Just 1 meal per day.
Zimbabwe used to be the breadbasket of Africa. Now, 4 million people are facing food shortages. It is in the grip of its worst drought in a generation, and cash is running out for Zimbabwe's leaders too.
The government of Zimbabwe is spending up to 97% of its revenue on the wage bill. That leaves 3% for, capital projects and investment into infrastructure and other sectors of the economy.
President Robert Mugabe blames Western sanctions imposed on his government for alleged vote rigging and human rights abuses. There have been no IMF funds since 1999.
The Zimbabwean economy is slowly sliding into recession. I think the honeymoon that we saw between 2009 and 2012 is over.
It wasn't much of a honeymoon anyway, and anger is growing, with many protests, some becoming violent, being organized via social media.
I could see this coming, and like I said, something has to be done.
92-year-old Mugabe has promised to slash public spending. With a budget deficit set to top $1 billion this year, 6 times the initial projection, he has to do something. Now, on a positive note, African capital markets are now attracting both local and international private equity. Rwandan Finance Minister Cleaver Gatete explained why when he spoke to VOA's Henok Fente on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly in New York.
Initially, the governments were the movers of the economy. But as the economy continues to grow and we are getting more of the middle income, we need the private sector to be leading. But the private sector have to get money from somewhere. And what has been lacking on our continent is actually the capital market to be able to drive and mobilize resources for the private sector investment. And this is what is happening. In our own countries, we've been establishing our capital market. And I was saying in the conference here, is that really each country developing their own capital market is not sufficient. But at the same time, I think what is more sustainable is what we are developing in East Africa, where we are trying to interlink all the capital markets in the region so that there is a clear payment system that is established, there is a clear trading platform that is established, and then the rules of the game that are the same for the whole region being treated as local people, so that you can now have the economies of scale to boost those capital markets. And that way then they can be able to attract resources that can be used by the private sector for investment. That's a challenge that we are developing together. We are developing the skills that are needed for the capital market, not as developed as the Western world, but this is why we are investing heavily into the skills, into the incentives to attract people who are establishing the products, into the funds who are coming to invest, especially the private equity funds, into our development process.
And how could that integration take place? I know we're comparing apples and oranges here, but trade, intra-African trade, is at a minimum about 10%. How is the financial sector any different in that regard in terms of integrating the financial sector?
Actually, there is progress that is being made. Indeed, that's how it was. But if I take the example of East African community, where we are creating one market, where we are creating one customs union that is happening, and also we are creating a monetary union within the East Africa, it's in the protocol, and we are now integrating them. Meaning that actually we are harmonizing all the rules and regulations for the banking system, for the pension, for the insurance, for the capital market. We are now harmonizing together and also providing the similar incentives within the East African community. And also within the region, actually there is progress that's being made, where the East African community, the common market for Eastern and Southern Africa, and also for the SADC, which are coming together now as one, to make sure that they harmonize their own rules, their own processes and procedures. And this is helping to make sure that there's no duplication of efforts within that kind of region, which is quite a big one. So I can say that the leaders in our region are really leading by example in terms of realizing the importance of integration. Indeed, intra-African trade is around 12% compared to, of course, how we trade elsewhere. And that's why there is heavy investment in the infrastructure, also removing certain barriers of trade, such as requirement for the visa. In some parts of East African community, there is no requirement for even a passport. You just use your ID card. To have removed all the roaming charges. We are also, once you enter one country, you can also go to other countries without requiring another kind of visa. We have removed all the roaming charges. So there are steps that have been taken in terms of making sure that you make it easier for people to move, for people to trade, for the money to flow, since we have inter-East African payment system that has been accepted, where we don't have to change money through the US dollar and then back to local currencies. So there are steps, but we need more.
I'm sure there are steps. The African Union is coming up with this free movement agreement. And in a conversation that I had with the former president of the African Development Bank, Donald Kabiruka, he was stressing the fact that even though some governments do not want to liberalize the sector, especially the financial sector, they just cannot let go. How is Rwanda doing it, coming from the same platform?
Actually, in Rwanda, in terms of liberalizing the financial sector, for us, it is highly liberalized. And actually, even the capital, we follow the international standards in terms of regulating our financial market, but also for the capital, you can bring in an amount, you can take out an amount. It's by law. So it's highly, highly liberalized economy, and that's why highly integrated.
Well, that's Rwandan Finance Minister Clive Gatete speaking to VOA's Henok Fante.